Hi, my name is David Morrow, Hard Target from Targeted Nation. This is our team here, Maria and Travis. There's other people that's not here tonight, but we have Ryan from Cognitive Investigative Services. He specializes in finding out who's doing what to us in the targeted community, and he knows a lot about this program. He also has a website and channel as well. And Ryan, go ahead, man.
Well, thank you. Ryan Michelle, I'm with CIS. We're cognitive science investigators. So we look for technologies that essentially are very little known and abused, generally used on that of targeted individuals like ourselves. Um, a little background. So I was investigating two targeted victims as a software engineer, curious about their symptomology, what was happening to them, and honestly quite skeptical, excuse me. Um, and then I was subsequently targeted by the FBI myself. So we were first approached by the gang stalking unit. They asked us to come work for them. I was adamant against it, as was we're a small team of three, a nonprofit, and first started with phone calls, threatening phone calls. Then, of course, it moved over into more aggressive, resident frequency attacks, mentally, physically, and emotionally. So we understand that the experience of victims is all different, but often I've interviewed like 300, and we find that the symptomology of the victims is very similar. So, of course, there's so much information out there, and unfortunately, this technology should never have been let out. But seeing that it has, there's little accountability, very little compliance or enforcement. In fact, for the last 20 years, if you look back, even to Mr. Hall in front of the Clinton administration, people have essentially complained of being tortured, tormented, being subjected to cruel and unusual punishment without due process. It's an invisible weapon, and granted, it's hideous when applied, and that's why it's very hard to prove for most, and can be very disconcerting and confusing to those for which it's happening. So the only thing we're trying to do is gather people together. I have to be honest. In most cases, people always deserve a chance to vent. There's very few people that you can actually talk to this about that won't first label you as being,
I'll tell you what I'll do. I will give it some thought.
Am I not on mute?
Well,
she's good.
Oh, Maria.
I'll just conclude by saying there's quite a few stigmas with unfortunately targeted victims. One of that is the misdiagnosis of mental illness, schizophrenia, delusions, which are, can very well be attributed to the technical V2K, or we refer to it as recurrent neural networks, remote neural monitoring. That's MK technology, actually, that allows people to imperceivably to anyone else hear things like voices. So what happens is there's an acoustic paradigm, which is essentially infrared. It comes from satellites and cell towers that's pointed at your celiac. And you can literally overnight start hearing conversations and voices. So what's the first thing people respond to? You go tell a family member or a friend, they say, well, you need to go see a psychiatrist. These people are telling you to kill yourself, or they're angels, demons, gods, ancestors, gangsters. I mean, I've heard and, experienced a lot. Another thing we call synthetic clairvoyance is actually I make the reference to that of the old catheter tubes and the rabbit ears, where you'll actually get holographic what amounts to holograms, which are projected over your visual cortex. So some people will complain about seeing lights, being zapped, seeing shadow figures when they close their eyes or when their eyes are open. So that technology is called BCI or HMI. It's all wireless and remote. Fact is, you can literally beam it into folks' heads. It's like a video game. So This investigation really originally started with Mr. Byron Coffrin and him leaving security industry specialist. So he revealed to a lot of us in the software community the use of recurrent neural networks and remote neural monitoring, along with the emotional resonant frequencies that change people's behavior, actions, ultimately their actions, basically emotional modification. Um, Resonant frequencies as mapped in the MK Ultra era. So again, I picked it up kind of as a volunteer job for some victims, and then it turned on me when I started calling out the FBI's gang stalking unit and their use of community stalkers, which were undeputized, that are utilizing databases like ATIC and RIS. It's like a $12 subscription, but these people literally were targeted individuals themselves. We call them proxies, which are working for these said agencies, or let's just say are so despondent that they become extremely vengeful. So you can imagine the psychological torment on anyone if you've been a victim, and the things you're convinced of, the things you're lied to about, the things you're told to do. A lot of victims can resonate with that experience where someone who isn't targeted, let's say a family member or a friend, they generally suffer what we call the fray, which is if you're being induced like a negative emotional frequency, like agitation, you're being told things like kill yourself, or um, you're a POS and you've never done anything good in your life. Well, that same negativity affects those around you, not just because of your reaction, even if you're happy as a clam, but literally the same frequencies as we put up on our website. You can pull that US patent list off our file share. And for most targeted victims, it's extremely disturbing but refreshing to see that, look, there's a real technology that causes this induced reaction or the consequence of use. So we try to stay grounded. I know this goes into a lot of different places. We stick primarily with the neural signature, which everyone has a unique neural signature like a fingerprint. We stick with the US patents, the distribution methods, which are that of satellite, cell phone towers, and to be honest, can be just about any electronic that you have. So if you look at the US patent list, you'll see things like AC induction to not only your house, subliminal messaging, not only directly, let's say on subject populations or people around you, but even through things like your computer and TV, which sounds odd to most. But if you're induced with this, you'll know what we're talking about. So we try to cover that wide range. So out of 300, I've met many people with varying degrees of the dosage. I was induced with what's called a heavy dose to keep my mouth shut. I was told that these are classified surveillance and investigative methods, which are sealed in federal warrants, which is true. But the fact is we don't see them as investigative or surveillance methods because they utilize torture tactics, right? So you can't induce a true, let's just say, one, surveillance is covert. So it's not a two-way radio for those that get that dosage or the MK version of the equivalent of a two-way radio. And then two, in our system of law, you're not allowed to torture people to induce, to basically elicit whatever. It's not, you're not to be interrogated or tortured, right? You have a right to remain silent. You have a right to your Miranda rights, right to counsel, and most, if not all, of these victims have been denied that, but threatened with malicious prosecution. So I guess I'll just conclude by saying that, we are not attorneys. We are working with several bigger law firms, and we are gathering targeted victims regardless of experience with those symptoms to try to bring together a group, a massive group, because we believe upon going after multiple agencies, not just things like targeted justice went after the FBI and I'm sorry, after the DOJ in Garland. We would like to go after everything from the EPA. Obviously, this is an environmental issue. The FCC, excuse me, and you name it across the board, the DOJ, the FBI. We have victims which will testify to being recruited by the CIA and used by DARPA, and their signatures are still being used. So they're essentially discarded. We're aware of children that are being experimented on.
Children.
Just honestly, all kinds of folks. It's hideous, and it's all unconsensual, right? So even though we're aware too of other technologies that exist, especially that of nanotech and chips, and we wouldn't discredit that because I know they're used as biological weapons. Frankly, you could look at
You
things
can't say certain words or YouTube will edit you out,
or other
for sure.
technologies which have existed for some time. The reason we stick with the brain signature is because it doesn't require that technology. Essentially, like Maria had pointed out, Mr. Roger told us here, you know, he is extremely, his expertise is that in gene sequencing and how resonant frequencies can be fine-tuned to your DNA so that even without obtaining a physical scan or linear scan of your, let's say, your neural signature that obtained, they can obtain the same thing through your DNA. So no one else around you would receive that kind of treatment, which is important, right? So we look for different avenues. And that's kind of our legal approach is to take the symptomology of all these victims, to find the funnel of how people have gotten through and into the TDSB NIS code 3 code 4 list. Because honestly, as the Durham report admitted, you know, now the FBI can they're referring to Catholics as extremists and recruiting, you know, PTO mothers and fathers that disagree with curriculum, up to, unfortunately, ex-felons which have served their time and finished their probation, and, you know, without a judge's order, well, that we believe, other than we're getting into the FISA court stuff soon, because we'd like to know what they really know about the technology and the application thereof. I mean, it's the equivalent. We call it the equivalent of modern day slavery, because, you know, literally they're stealing with a recurrent neural network and remote neural monitoring. If you know you're on it, literally there's a thought to text technology through BCI, which is brain computer interface, where each and every thought you have, even if it's a good idea, let's say you're an inventor or just have a good idea, is taken from you. And it's thought to text is much like speech to text, right, on your phone. So you press a little microphone on your phone and you say, honey, I'm going to the grocery store, and you hit send, it types it out. It's a very similar technology, but thought to text. This is all done wirelessly. It doesn't require a local, let's say, mobster or gang stalker to be following you around. It's very close to that of V2K technologies, but they're different variations. So if you go onto the website under the patent list, you're going to see the variation of technologies and how they're applied. It's definitely a humanitarian crisis in general. It's not meant for surveillance. It tortures people. And I've seen it, unfortunately, run a lot of good people into dereliction and to worse. So beyond that, I appreciate you listening to us. And if we can help in any way or contribute, again, we're a nonprofit, so we do what we can with what we have. Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Pass it back to you.
No problem. That was really well spoken. Yeah, we're definitely interested in digging more into depth with all this. We were right on the right track with all this, everything you said. There's a few things in that I took notes on that we weren't really sure about with the US patent. I didn't know that you could just look all that stuff up in there because, you know, the way this cohort program works, they try to hide everything, but they also leave a lot of stuff out there for people that you're not going to look, you know, you're not going to look there to see it.
The other thing that I've been noticing, like I've been on the phone with Apple for the last 3 weeks, and you can I've sent them videos of them illegally hacking my phone. I've sent them my analog data where they're hacking my phone. and they won't even give me the names and numbers to these devices that are illegally hacking my phone. So the companies can be held liable as well, because they are also allowing your perpetrators to follow you in the store, allowing them to access your stuff. There is laws against cybersecurity, and none of those when you ask for an investigation or get clarified of who these abusers are, because they're tracking you place to place to assault you, and they're not giving you the information to open up the investigation or to verify who they are so you can go to the proper authorities to file these investigations. That's also another thing that we can also look at.
And
Like
I
at the
agree.
post office, I'm sitting here at the post office right now, and they're sitting across the street and they're setting up their little air tags or being on their phones to allow them to pre-planning for them to come so they could assault me. And that's what I think, that's the reason why they're modifying our genetic genes as well. And I think that's the reason why they were stealing my unfortunately my tampons. I mean, or if you did the COVID vaccine, and my honestly, the theory I have is the same as yours, Ryan. You know, every time I show up of a place, my EMF readings go through the roof. So not only are they stealing our Neuralink and turn link it to this AI program, but they're stealing everybody else as well and linking it through their Wi-Fi device and their, everywhere I show up.
So there was a
But
recent article that just outlined some of the the vaccine technologies that were used and how that those actually, along with 5G, creates EMFs, large EMFs between those that have been vaccinated. We're naturally transceivers. It's like the crystalline spike protein self-replicating. So there is some research there that's definitely provable. I just want to explain our general approach. So targeted justice, like many other suits, have gone directly after the TDSB, and their basis has been discrimination to be on these watch lists, which is true, right? But we take it a step further in our aggression. We feel that they're not aggressive enough, and that they're not calling them out for one. What's the
illegal
government's name?
experimentation.
Sure. Well, that we all know that. But just in a court of law alone, right? You have, let's say, 300 or 1,000 or 10,000 victims with the same symptoms. Well, the government, after all these complaints, as we make them uniform, we're coming out with a packet. They derelicted their duty to protect and serve. They're willfully neglectful, at the very least. I mean, we believe that there's complicity, especially at a certain level. And yes, and I do admit that illegal surveillance, especially
And
with
pharmaceutical drugs to try to cure, playing saving grace to cure you for all these symptoms.
Well, I will address the FDA. So that's another agency we intend to go after, only because of the way that they have classified some of these devices as smart devices, and literally they cause harm to the human body. So the use of this technology causes everything from tissue damage, brain damage, confusion, slow cognition, headaches. We're not even referring to mental or psychological distress, especially in the application thereof with these RODs, operators, and the ICEs of these RNNs, which, if you're getting, the synthetic telepathy, just note, these are not your friends. These people work in comm centers. They are wearing headsets. And generally, even if you Google a picture of a comm center, if you ever see the screen, what do you see behind the screen? It's generally a frequency, right?
Right.
Or at least a wave. So I'll touch base on the illegal surveillance aspect, especially involving the FBI. We know that they have what's called listening stations with V2K, where literally there's handheld devices that can use a laser pointer to point through, let's say, even a blind or something open, and you can hear what's going on in the house. We've seen other devices like light bulbs, and those are kind of buggy inside. But these are literally distributed over the course of cell phone towers and networks, just on the FBI level alone. And the fact that we know, and there's been admissions that these gang stalking units are able to recruit other, let's just say, less than savory, undeputized, untrained people to partake in investigations. And in some cases,
Criminals.
yes. Well, in some cases, you're talking about literal harassment. You're talking about honeypotting people with illegal tactics. We're going to come put a hit on you. We're going to kidnap your
Or a
kids. We're
distraction.
going to, well, yeah, it's just harassment. I mean, ultimately, they're death threats in a lot of cases. So
Right.
we like to use the reference to that of Auschwitz, right? So America denied that the Holocaust even existed till years after we got into the war, and then we claimed some kind of victory that we stopped it. This is much like that and been going on for 20 years. The main issue is, I mean, we call it assisted suicide without consent, like a state-sponsored Dr. Kevorkian esque, forgive me, orgy of folks that
It's,
one of
yeah,
a couple of things are happening, right?
a
So either,
perfect murder.
yeah, they've lost complete control of, let's say, their assets that are harassing others illegally, and they're letting people pit each other. They're pitting people against each other. Two, they're complicit in cleaning up their dirty laundry, right? So we talk about in some of our videos, the MLK suicide letter that was sent in 2 days prior by the FBI to him receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, and then he was shot not long after. Or Ruby Ridge, man shot at his table. Waco, an ill-advised raid. I mean, on and on and on. So we know that over the course of time, the FBI, even with COINTELPRO, has been used, funded by the CIA, and used to cover up a lot of issues, right? So we'll just say when we focus on them, we call them out on the nitty gritty. They admit to having a gang stalking unit. What is generally people refer to this as gang stalking, right? We're not gangsters, most of us. We're not affiliated with folks in that business. A massive majority of us. It doesn't matter if you were or you weren't. The fact is that we don't even treat capital offenders that are convicted of murder this way, right? We don't torture them to death. They get their day in court. Even serial killers, we don't constantly torture them like nice folks that are getting this treatment. And it really doesn't matter to me about someone's background or not, past infringements, or I've seen them all, and literally in the victims we have. That's what's so disparaging about it, is that people are being victimized. So again, we look back to places like the FBI, then up even to the CIA and DARPA, and through the Department of Homeland Security and these other agencies, that they're all complicit, or at least let's just say derelicting their duty at the very least. Legally, there's liability for them to take care of us, American people. So in the FDA's stance, or the NIH, we bring up the not only the health concerns, but the fact that this has already been deemed a smart device. This MK technology, the M is obviously mine, the K is the German K, not the Latin C, right, for control, from MK Ultra. So that's from Paperclip and those doctors. For anyone to argue even there to state that this technology is a smart device and safe, it's absolutely out of control. So that's kind of
That
our
is not
strategy.
safe.
Oh,
They've elevated my heart. They've blurred my vision. It's not safe because organs, they can shut you down at any time.
Ryan, can I ask
It's
you a
not
question?
safe.
I got a question.
yes, sir.
I've been told since I've learned all this stuff that the gang stalking word is a government term that they use. So like when you call, say, the Fusion Center, or you call the FBI field office, like we have, we all got proof of, and if you mention that word, or you start mentioning people following you, and then in the terms of that, they will hang up on you. So that's a term that they use for us to make it sound like it's crazy or something. What's the proper terminology or the proper program terms that they use for this, that they can identify themselves as? Like, say it's like you as an agent or I was an agent. How do we identify each other, knowing that we're in this program? Because whenever I've seen people in operations work, especially against me in the past, they would know somehow that they were connected to this. I don't know if they were communicating through text, email, but the people wouldn't even know each other, but they knew that I was a target, so they would roll out whatever else that they had planned for me. But they knew within contact with each other about this program. How do they do that in a vast
Okay.
thing?
So the most recent CIA program that we know to be in place now is called ventriloquist.
Ventriloquist?
So yes. So if you also look at that U.S. patent list, you're going to find that a few of those patents refer to ventriloquist, and this is your talk through aspect. So certain resonant frequency patents allow, that's what we call proxification in two ways. So consensually based, that could have been a victim prior to, that ceded to, let's say, their worst nature. They were told that they were going to be some special investigator, or they needed to go ahead and watch you. Or two, it's the effect that people have, like in a grocery store, thinking that, you know, someone 20 yards from me is talking to me, even though they're moving their lips. But in the victim's mind, or the targeted victim's mind, they're the same technology. They can literally use an unwitting individual, unbeknownst to them, for you to receive that message. So it seems, you know, this also includes physical and auditory movements, gestures.
What
I
I've
mean,
noticed they've
it's
been doing
incredible.
is
Hold on a
It's
second, Maria.
incredible.
they
Let him talk. Hold on.
sorry.
So
What I
the term gang
uh,
stalking is, it does have a negative connotation with law enforcement, because they assume it's like cartel, right? That they're chasing drug dealers and cartel members. So perhaps there's validity to that. We refer to it as well as community stalking, or frankly just targeted victims. I know, you know, that doesn't answer your question fully, but we are aware of you know, the CIA's ventriloquist program, along with another program that involves, to be honest with you, cybertronics and some robotics. We call it neural soul snaring, and I can explain that another time. That's a program with DARPA and the U.S. military and the Space Force. Um, but it's quite sad that the U.S. government, instead of recruiting folks that, you know, may be highly cognitive and receptive to these things, that they decide to use them and experiment on them, drive them into dereliction, cause massive distress, and then pawn them off as being, oh, you need to go see mental health services and get lithium. A majority of the victims I see, and statistically, like someone that gets schizophrenia, it happens in their, you know, late teens, early 20s. It doesn't happen in their 40s. You know, a majority of the folks I deal with, you're talking later on in life, that just came out of the blue, and these people haven't lost their mind. You can tell that you know, they're under extreme duress. The same, different experience, same symptomology, same tactics, same method. We call it slow kill as well, which is a voice of God weapon. That's what these MK technologies are used for. So it was also used in the Iraq War. It dropped an entire battalion of Iraqis, got them to leave their tanks because they were told that Allah told them to give up, right? Why this is used on US citizens is beyond me. So they call it a lot of different things, but it is a voice of God weapon. It is an MK technology. It is distributed by, there's very few agencies in the world that can pull all this off. Fusion centers are a part of it. That's a, you know, Air Force is generally a major distribution hub. But, you know, when they claim it's dark web hackers and just people running around, the fact is simple. Now, people, a third of the population is highly receptive to the subliminal messaging that's put out, and then also the MK technology. Imagine most people aren't as stubborn as most adamant victims. They start hearing a voice or seeing a vision. They tell them that, hey, I need you to go do this. I'm an angel. I'm a god. I'm a demon. I'm going to do this to your family and kids. We're going to make you crazy. You're going to go to a crazy ward. You know, that's extremely disturbing to anyone, right? Out of the blue, especially when you have absolutely no idea that this technology exists or the use. I mean, admittedly, there are some good uses for stuff like this, but why it's been let out of the cage at the very least, why it's been misused, They mistreat people. We're talking millions of people, millions. And the only thing we're trying to do, regardless of circumstance, and I know that there's other things going on, is just to bring people together into a funnel and say, look, regardless of circumstance, this is what we believe is happening to you. And if it makes sense and you're willing to testify to that, then please join us and, let's go at it. We know there's a lot of other stuff out there too, right? But those of us that have gotten like the heavy dose know how traumatizing this can be to every day, right? It's not just, it doesn't turn off, and people don't realize that. They say things like, I work with other doctors, psychiatrists, a physicist, an environmental scientist, and we all have the same conception that this is something you can't just turn off. People say, oh, well, change your mindset, right? Just go off and do something different. These targeted victims can't do that. That's not a choice. But as easy as it is, if really the powers that be would like to turn it off, all they have to do is take your name on a line. Let's assume, this is your name. Let's just assume that this was a software package and this is your name. All I have to do is delete this line. Granted, say, okay, Mr. David, I'm going to take you off this Dr. Frankenstein program, and all I have to do is hit delete, and guess what? That's it. That's as simple as it is.
Too much money's involved, correct?
To be honest, I try not to. I mean, I wrap my head around that issue all the time. Like, what is the greater plan? It doesn't seem to provide much good. I think that they create more terrorist and false flag events with technologies like this and the way it's used, because it's unconsensual. The people that are running it are absolutely nefarious. I always point out the naval shipyard shooting, because in his manifesto, the poor man was an active Navy service member, and pointed out that he was targeted directly and driven to near insanity. So one of two things happened. He either became kind of a Manchurian candidate for a false flag, which he said in the manifesto, or he felt he had absolutely no other recourse or remedy but to react in the way he did, which is extremely sad, right? So this technology could be used in the opposite sense. If people consented to it, which is number one, you could use it in a happy sense. Like SIS is known to spray inner city neighborhoods with negativity, and then rich neighborhoods with go look at the flowers and the unicorns, right? In this case, directed or targeted victims are a little different in the sense that you are the things that you perceive, no one else around you really does. And that's the problem, but it's also kind of the nefarious genius of the design, right? Because even if you talk to your mother, your father, you perceive certain things that they don't, because literally that frequency is tuned to you, your signature to you specifically. And it doesn't mean that you have a mental illness. And this is a big problem in the medical community too, is in med schools, they're not taught how to literally screen for the difference, right? So I use the example prior to all this technology, like hysteria back in the Wild West. They said women had hysteria because you were menstruating. And nowadays we look back and said, that's ridiculous. A woman menstruates once a month, and just because there's emotional ups and downs, she doesn't have hysteria. Now, nowadays, I even go back another step, before, schizophrenia, we had things like people were telepathic or visionaries or, had a slew of other abilities that we don't recognize anymore. They were called prophets and shaman and medicine men and women and so on and so forth. The perversion is nowadays between the medical version of schizophrenia and the technology that's induced with, RNNs, RNM, V2K, VM, BCI, HMI, is they're perverting that, right? They have a synthetic version of, that's enhanced telepathy. They can inject, things like holograms and visions. They can manipulate and project that. There's a lot of deceit involved. So we just like to stick with the technology of how we know it's used and how it can be how it's been perversely used. You know, um, they literally, their tactics, we post them on our website at cistech.info. That's written and sworn affidavits of folks that have heard everything from that they're being talked to by gods, angels, demons, ancestors, gangsters, FBI, CIA agents, all of these other authorities, to aliens. I mean, it's literally so disturbing to the average person that has no idea this exists, and that's the problem, right? So that's why we post the patent list that we put together and we grow all the time, is because if people were aware of this technology, just like a cell phone, 40 years ago didn't exist, right? And nowadays you've got more computing power in your cell phone than you did the Apollo program. But back then you would have been seen as some kind of heretic, right? So the simplest way we put it to people is 300 years ago, you thought that the world was flat. If you sail too far off into the ocean, you're going to fly off into space, or that the earth is the center of the universe and everyone else that thought differently was a heretic. That is what's going on right now with this technology. They're literally, people are literally unaware of what it can do and how it's applied. So I'll just end it there. I appreciate it, and I hope we can work together in the future and hopefully make a difference, as many people need that. So lots of people need that.
So after you interview people, what is your next process?
Okay, so what I do is mostly screen, right? And I'm a software engineer, and I'm very familiar with how these technologies work. And there's a lot of ways to discern someone who is a legitimate victim based on their experience, and obviously we have to get to a point where there's trust, right? So if you start talking to folks, and the first question you ask is, are you hearing voices or seeing visions, right? Most people that understand how this works, they're very apprehensive, and understandably. There's a lot of people that are going to tell you that you're crazy, or that you need to go see mental health services and get on lithium. Well, so we go through a screening process. I like to get to know people. Then we classify the victims based on dosage, right? So not everyone, some people may have the phantom pains, burns, stings, shocks to private areas, headaches, confusion, delusions, or not even, let's not go delusions yet, but fatigue, so on and so forth. While others you might add on things like the V2K or RNNs, where they're communicating with those within their networks, to hearing, auditory things like sounds that shouldn't be there, things drugged through, the attic, or, someone scratching or pounding on the window, things like this. That's just acoustic paradigm stuff, right? But that's essentially the step, is getting to know people and then classifying them. A very small part of that group, including me, very, very few, get what we call the full dose. So you're basically just onslaughted by not only information that what you're trying to get out there, the phone calls you make. That's why we record them and we put them on our website. So if you go to the TI Wall of Shame, you're going to see that we call just about everyone, and when we do, we post them up there so people can hear, us argue with them, or like David said, the FBI hanging up on us. They've done that many times, so it doesn't really bother me all that much. But that's really the next step, is to earn trust with people. They're all victims, but you look for that symptomology. We're building a packet that essentially provides this. So we ask people to make complaints, and we provide them a very basic format of, being victimized, and symptomology based, not your whole experience, but we're going to show them how to make complaints with, various agencies across the board. Then gather medical records, right? So you've got your paper trail that we're building, the medical records, the complaints. And then of course, that the point is, unlike targeted justice, we were kind of disappointed they only used like 18 victims. I mean, we want to get to about 300, because it's undeniable at that case, right? At that point, if you get 300 people with the same symptoms on the same path and the same funnel, making
right.
a logical, complaint of what's happening to them. Here's the technology. Here's how it's misused. Here's how these people suffer. Yeah, go ahead.
Um, the thing here we learned uh since November, we had a bunch of targeted justice people in our group. We was over 110 at this point, but we were doing investigative work on targeted justice because there was some really solid people out there that knew about targeted justice as being a scam, and they are government agents. They are. We have proved that. We have proved that they have ties to Masonic lodges. We proved that they also had two different targeted justice they were collecting money on from targeted individuals. I mean, if you think about it, the targeted community, we don't have a lot of money. So they're making $5 million a year off the record. That's in the Zoom business that we looked up, and all these companies that they're tied for. We also dug into that, and then as while we was doing this, it was heating Anna Toledo up beyond no return. And then we discovered that Richard Lighthouse's real name is Winter Owen Covert, and that's in the targeted justice lawsuit. And we had her and a bunch of people on Roy Ecup's channel. Right now, he's still messing with her. I have no idea why. He just made a video with Robert Duncan last week, and he's getting all this notoriety and everything, but he's playing both sides of it just like they were. And they were trying to basically figure out how we were doing what we were doing, how we were figuring out their techniques and tactics, all as to where they would go to, let's say, a fusion director's house that's on their website and send flyers to the wives of these people. Now, why would you do that? That's going to put you even more targeted. Or another little tactic they had on their website is to go to like a CIA hangout in Texas, go take pictures of these people and mess with them. And Anna Toledo's sitting here saying that it's going to stop your targeting. No, it's going to increase your targeting. Then she wanted to do a FOIA request, ask the FBI and all these letters, CIA and everybody, and they'll get us off the list. That's what she said before the lawsuit came out. We tried that. We got letters back stating that they shredded our information. And then shortly after that, we exposed them for what they are. The day we exposed them, totally exposed them, everybody that was in that lawsuit was jumping out of our group. And then that's when they filed it finally on, I think it was January 13th, if I'm not mistaken. And then from then on out, our targeting increased. Everything went through the ceiling. And then she's trying to clear her name and target Justice's name. And we got a lot of videos on them and a lot of flaws and the people they're working with, the people that the guy from across the pond has brought to us that were infiltrators, trying to destroy our lawsuit, try to destroy all of our scans and everything like that. So that's one thing that I'm not crystal clear on, and that's why I'm really leery about bringing new people in, is because the people that we have to vet, you can vet them till the sun goes down, and they're still going to be agents, and it's almost impossible to pick through that. That's why we're really leery, not paranoid to the fact of it all, but it's hard and very hard. They give telltale signs of being perps, as people would notice, but I don't understand how they are still targeted and participating and doing what they're doing to wreck everybody else's plans and everything to bring this to light. I'm sure you ran across it.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't have all those answers. So what we try to do, and we know that this goes into some pretty dark rabbit holes. I mean, specifically, we're actually investigating some Masonic lodges too. But what our feeling is in general is to focus on the responsibility of the U.S. government to protect its citizens, right? People are being tortured, regardless of where it goes. The fact is we pay taxes. Our government's job, the military's job, is to protect the U.S. citizen. That's it, right? That's the number one job. So if millions are being tortured and no one's listening, not only do we want to go after the directors individually, but filing multiple suits across the board, calling out those directors and the agencies and having the victims to line up with the same symptomology, even though, like I said, their experience is going to be different. So I don't really know a whole lot about what's going on with targeted justice.
Don't know. we tried to contact the guy. We tried calling him back. We have no doubt that he got cut off his communication.
Generals gathered in their masses.
Wait a minute, here he comes back. Wait a minute.
Just like witches at black masses. Evil minds that plot destruction. Sorcerer of death's construction. In the fields of bodies burning. As the war machine keeps turning. Death and hatred to mankind. Poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh, Lord, yeah.
Why you want to create terrorism, war on terror, which is kind of lunacy. Because
now in darkness, world stops turning. Ashes where the body's burning. No more war pigs have the power. And as God has struck the hour. Day of judgment, God is calling. On the knees, the war pigs crawling, begging mercies for the sins. Satan laughing spreads his wings. Oh Lord, yeah.
technology. It's distributed through satellites and cell phone towers. Like we just did a story, for example, many of our victims have had the exact same experience as Jennifer DeStefano that was just testified in front of Congress, right? So I've even gotten these calls where my daughter, they kidnapped my daughter. I need to come meet her. They're all 911 calls. I've reported them all to the FBI, along with many victims of ours. No one's reached out to us. We didn't get to go in front of Congress. Two, we know it's not AI, right? So,
Right.
well, we know that it's aspects of AI, but they're not dark web hackers. So the way we put it to the FBI in one of our
Is it a algorithm of some sort?
So the way a recurrent neural network works, they're designed, the architecture is different. So one is an automated form of, yes, in one way, yes. The architecture most V2K / NK victims experience is what's called modular. So the architecture of a modular neural network, recurrent neural network with remote neural monitoring has to do with both. And most that get that acoustic paradigm, you can tell the difference, right? So a computer is unemotional. A computer is not going to make mistakes verbally. You can't catch a computer up in a mistake. But if you have active operators or other TI victims on your network, whether they're working with you or against you, there's a good patent by Dali, D-A-L-I. He's a Chinese inventor that actually back traces the targeted victim to the recurrent network and teaches the victim through a software program how to distinguish the difference, right? Between that of an automation program, and it's called anti-V2K tech. Although it's the true classification, V2K, MK, VM, PM, RI, but yes. So you can actually Google that. It's DALI, space LI, and there's a U.S. patent, and he literally showed you.
What was that? What was that called again? Can you give it to us one more time?
It's anti-V2K patent. You can Google it, and the patent holder, his name is DA space LI. So
TA space LI.
Yeah, so that's his name. He's Chinese, and what's interesting about that patent and the application is, and it's very simple, right? It's the equivalent of talking back those that get that dosage, talking, let's just say negatively back towards that recurrent neural network and catching them in lies, right? Whether you mentioned something funny or something insulting, I tend to lean towards the insulting side, insulting some of their honor. And that's, I've been successful in weeding out quite a few when we infiltrate these networks by just putting them on the spot, right? So if you're, from our perspective, if you're working in a comm center and these technologies are distributed through fusion centers, Air Force bases, satellites, cell phone networks. Back to the Jennifer DeStefano issue, she got in front of Congress, and the FBI claimed that this was dark web hackers, right? Somehow dark web hackers hacked into a cell phone network. Then they hacked into her daughter's cell phone. They got a full, with voice monitoring, got a full profile on the daughter to replicate the voice. Then they knew exactly when the daughter was leaving on a ski trip. So they called back the mother when the daughter was on a ski trip alone, just to demand $1 million from a middle income mother that can't afford that. She lives in a $400,000 house. So our question to them was, and they couldn't backtrace the voice over IP number. They couldn't find the provider or the credit card used. They never found the perpetrator. So our question to them was pretty much like, well, this has happened to many of our victims. And your inability to do simple investigative work with all your tools that you have, it throws up a lot of flags, obvious ones, right? So let's just say the most obvious in that case is dark web hackers, even with certain aspects of AI, which isn't true AI, right? Or automation, they're not going to break into cell phone networks. They're going to do research in advance because you can buy consumer data anywhere, like Data Axle, or you'll find you're not going to target a middle income woman with a low probability score when you can target Donald Trump, right? Or, a super rich guy. So if you're going to spend that time and effort, it's not going to be, on a lower middle class or income family. It doesn't make any sense. And, we brought up the point that even in that case, because the FBI utilizes technology like Stingray. So what Stingray is, it's essentially a band. It's a relay.
We're familiar
So
with
many-
that. We looked that up, but if you got some more information, we'd love to hear it.
Well, I'll just explain the basic premise. So let's just assume I'm in a van, and instead of your cell phone tower, the first ping is here. So I put a band with the mini tower here between you and me. So this is the transceiver, right? The flow through. So you're going to get incoming, outgoing messages both ways. So literally, this is the technology we're talking about that using. Dark web hackers aren't driving around with vans with Stingray technology in them, many cell towers, right? And if they were, why wouldn't they focus on someone else?
That
So-
motherfucker hit my damn truck. Sorry.
No, you're good. I hope you're okay.
I hope
So-
he didn't fuck my damn truck up.
What happened?
That fucking tractor trailer just hit my damn truck. I hope he didn't fuck it up.
You okay?
Bitch. Fucking, I gotta stop and look at it, but fucking he done hit my damn truck.
Oh no.
Motherfucker. Jesus fucking Christ, these motherfuckers can't drive here.
What is
Hey, Ryan, we would like, what David is saying, we would like to build a group. So, if you had a special client that was looking for a support group and support, or just people that don't look at you crazy when you talk about it, if you had one or two people that would be interested in having support from other TIs, that without a doubt in your mind, like we would really like to meet. If you could dish one out, I don't know, every so
Well,
often, and
maybe we could help each other, right? So
Right.
the reason I normally don't associate with specific groups is because some of the drama, right?
right?
And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it in general, but to stay objective for us is important and kind of neutral, because we hope to just be a collection point that focuses on the technology, but
Okay.
maybe we could help each other in this point. So whether, honestly, I'll tell you where we've got most of ours, and maybe you can help refer them to us, and I'll just hand them over to you, is places like Quora you'll find us on, or Facebook, or, visiting other groups and providing them, information, because I know there's a lot of personal stuff going on, but ultimately we have the same objective, is what I try to explain to people. We just want this shit to stop.
Yes.
We want our lives back. And yes, I know we're all due some reparation in a way for what's happened to us, but I like to focus more on the accountability and the dishonorment of those that knowingly, willingly, and intentionally do this. The rest by proxy is going to happen. Okay, like by bringing this to light and dishonoring the public officials that have knowledge and actively participate. The rest is just like a Camp Lejeune or a 3M earplugs, suit, right? So the money's going to come. So what I'm saying is, if you would consider, and I could assist you with this because we do a lot of development, hosting, all kinds of stuff, but I mean, one of two things, whatever you decide. So whether it be you utilize our information and some of our platforms to bring in others, like simply put that on your Facebook, and who comes in, when they come in, I can send them your way, because I literally I volunteer, we volunteer. That's who we are. We're not funded. We don't ask for money. We don't want money. We want justice. So that's it.
That's what we've been saying the whole time. Literally, I've heard other people say they were only interested in messing with us because they knew we got a lawsuit with Morgan and Morgan. And I told them from the rip, I don't give a shit about the money. I could care less. I could live in a cardboard box or a van by the river. I don't care. I want this shit to stop. I want these people brought to justice. I want all these other people that are going through this for all their pain to stop. I could give a shit less about the money. I'm 100% with you, and that's what my main focus is. I don't give a shit about no money. I could care less, or whose feelings or what. I ain't it for the feelings. I ain't it for the money. I'm in it to get this shit stopped, just like you are. So the rest of us. I want this shit to stop. I want this program to end. I want it to be brought to light, and that I've stressed that as all I can stress before. And a lot of people don't understand that. Well, don't you want to get paid? This ain't about money for me. You can't pay me from what you've destroyed me and other people's lives. There's no price tag on that.
Yeah. I mean, we need justice and the rest will come. So I agree. So maybe you would consider either not only joining us, but just assisting in us getting to the 300. The only reason we put up 300 is kind of the old Sparta 300. That's the number we kind of came up with,
The
small
Spartans.
group, but yeah,
Well, Ryan, if you would do this for us, then
overwhelming.
can we join you then? Because
Yeah,
that would make our day, because it's the right path to do it. That way we're not stuck in the dark. We're not stuck in the dark, but we've been through a lot of shit. We've been doing the right things. We were on the right track that you are, but you guys got it more going on than what we can do. And we've always been searching for the righteous way to do this, to bring this shit down, to bring their house of cards down and cut off the magicians' heads.
And this is the major issue. It's kind of like, to be honest, and it's like with TIs, it's like herding cats, right? So that's why we try to stay objective and neutral. We all have our experience. We all deserve a right in a forum to express that. But the biggest issue that I find, especially with other groups, is it becomes so, and there's nothing wrong with this, so personal on an individual level. Like, again, when I step back, I say, I understand this young lady's experience. My heart goes out to her. And I just wish that, we could all get on that page. So that's really, we're not far off. We're like 130 off, and we don't even really market very hard for it. But if you could consider absolutely, putting us out there, when we get to the 300, we're all in, and it's going to become thousands. I mean, literally, we only came up with 300 because we wanted it to be so overwhelming that once we get into these courtrooms, that it's literally, you're talking weeks of testimony of people saying the identical thing with the same symptom, different circumstance of how their lives have been destroyed. And that there's no.
Are you guys cool with that? I mean, are you guys cool with that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's do it, man. Let's do it. You guys down?
Yep.
Well, talk about it. But ultimately, if you want to build a different forum, I'll support you too. So
no,
you decide,
absolutely not. We're done shooting in the dark, man. We'd rather go with the 300 deal because we're Spartans too. I mean, let's run this. I mean, let's do it. You're the leader. You're the guy doing it. Let's go for it.
Thank you. We actually have another platform coming out called Fed Stalkers.
You were talking about that last time.
Yes. So let me explain this. So we're building personalized legal packets for people to take action on their own, not excluding any major, joining us or staying with us. But let's assume that some people
you want to flood the U.S. courts with cases.
That's correct.
Yes.
So here's what's more important. As a software engineer, it's called indexing and spidering. So they have what's called LexisNexis and Pacer. So every time you file a case and someone else does any research on it, it cross-references all that data and brings up all the similar cases. So yes. The point is to use the pen, even though we're all frustrated and we're men. Trust me, I want to break some of these people's faces really bad, but I realize that that's not going to get us to the finish line. You know what I mean? So all I want is peace. I'll move back to the country, mind my business, but it's hard for me to live with knowing that there's so many victims that suffer. So the reason we're coming up with Fed stalkers is literally to put all the individual directors. So the legal packets for people that they can print, fill out themselves per state and file. They'd only be responsible for, the legal fees, like $25 to file. And they would be based on the individuals. Let's say the local JTTF officer, Joint Terrorism Task Force officer that refers to the TDSB list, Christopher Ray, the actual individuals, different packets, and literally people based on their discretion could file a multitude of civil suits with the very similar argument without, the big law firms. So remember, you're not restricted, but if someone wants to do something now, like put the FBI on notice and say, you need to prove to me that you either have or don't have an active investigation, and that how did I end up on this NIS code 3 and code 4 list? Because ultimately, part of us wants to get our hands on that TDSB list. We know we probably never will, right? But that works two ways. If you call them out on it and they won't produce it, that also looks nefarious, does it not?
Right, because they're not giving you the data that you need, that they have.
Yeah. Or they give you a redacted version, or if we're really lucky and we get our hands on it, I'm calling everyone on that list. Like, do you realize what's happening to you? So that would be a firestorm for them as well. But essentially there we would provide the mailing address and the location of where, let's say, said person lives, so they could physically mail it to them, like certified mail. They could pick it. They could do a lot of things. I mean, really an information body for people to go in, fill stuff out online, print it, or file it online, so that we start getting hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of cases. Because the problem with this over 20 years is that they've gotten thousands of complaints, but they're scattered, right? So they have the databases which match, cross-reference, like they know, but they like to use the excuse that they're not uniform in the sense they haven't set up alarm bells. So what we hope to do is to essentially focus people, regardless of circumstance, on those technologies and the ability to do this. That's up to them. But it's also a paper trail for you and gives people a thing to do. If it's $25 and you walking into a courtroom to see an FBI director there who just paid $100,000 for a lawyer, and you do that to him 10 or 20 times, I mean, just saying.
I'd wipe that $100,000 smile off his fucking face fast. So would the rest of us.
I know that sounds bad, but ultimately, like, we can represent ourselves with little liability is the point, right? But someone of that stature, and it doesn't, the immunity clause is one of the things we're working on, because if it has to do with something criminal in nature, then there's no executive immunity, right? So if they've knowingly, willingly, intentionally, neglectfully caused this problem, you're presenting the argument. It's their job in that case. And remember, the civil bar is much lower than a criminal bar.
Right.
So it's kind of an interesting concept, and I know it's we want to turn gang stalking, basically people pitted against each other and us, all fighting, which is pretended, to Fed stalking, which is putting these folks.
I like that word. I'm gonna write that down in my notes.
So we got the URLs, Fed stalker,
Here.
Fed stalking, Fed stalker. So we're putting together the site, and it'll be basically, you'll see like gang stalking. The first part will be gang crossed out, and then we're going to add Fed stalking or Fed to the top, and it'll be we're working on it. So
hey Ryan, your little group you were talking about, TI All of Shame. I made a group on Facebook, like you call them proxies, but we call them perp. But I made a group called Perp Wall of Shame, or Proxy Wall of Shame.
That's awesome.
We also do a perp of the month too. We find people that are definitely perps, and we put them out on blast because it'll say perp hunter on one side. We do a perp of the month, and people love it. And the
Proxy of the month.
I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's not.
Because
honestly,
if you don't call them out, people will never know.
and we need to bring awareness, and that's one of the reasons we're doing Fed stocking, and we're going to focus only on government officials, their mailing addresses, and the legal forms to send certified mail. And I'm working on like 25 of them right now, so I'm doing it first.
That would be
Like,
the super
literally.
tip of the month right there.
So
We can do that.
but it's interesting. That'll come next. But you know, frankly, we picked 300 because of the Spartan thing. You know, there's strength in numbers, especially the right folks. And
It was actually 3,000.
Yep. Let's get there. I mean, it's gonna happen, right? I mean, you go to a general forum. I think we've got like 23,000 followers on our Facebook, but a lot of them are from, you know, they're everywhere. But to get, we're hoping to get to. I've been.
I started posting things on my personal wall.
That's
And they
amazing.
get mad when you do that.
I don't care. I started posting it on my personal wall, and guess what? A friend of mine that's not a TI shared it all.
That's great.
So
Raising awareness big time.
that's right.
That's the point. Is people think this is like mystical fairy dust or unicorns that, but it's happened in so many over so many years that, and too many have died or been led to their death or led to dereliction or led to, you know, substance issues, led to the dirt, separated from family and friends. I mean, it's psychological torment. There's no other way to put it. And it's worse than Chinese water torture because they bang on people all the time. So, you know, it's we know where they want to defer it, dark web hackers or somehow the Chinese. I had one, excuse me. I had one FBI agent tell me that it was the Chinese. That's fun because I know that the software does have multiple languages in it, but no, these folks are absolutely American. There's no doubt about it, you know. And even
I
if they
posted it on the. I posted something online that the U.S. owns it, but they're bringing China in to run it.
yeah, I saw that. I don't really take a whole lot of credence personally, although I like to stay hopeful that they said they're going to hand it to the Chinese.
Wait a minute, we're about to go to war with China, but we're gonna give it to them
To run it
Yeah,
because they're a lot
that-
more
run it.
advanced than we
That
are.
makes no sense. So
No,
we're basically letting China kill us all now, right
Now,
before we
sit
go
down
to
and
war.
think about it. They let all them Chinese come in from Mexico.
They did, or they were trying to. I don't know if they did, but it was like
Where do you
300
think they're gonna get?
Chinese people, military age, young, fit, look like they've been eating the whole time throughout the desert. They don't look skinny or malnourished, but they're just there waiting to cross the border.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a. Listen, there's a lot of fictitious things in the media, but there's a lot of real stuff in it. A
It's
psychic
all malicious.
once told me that if you want to know the truth about the U.S. government, watch sci-fi.
there's a little truth to everything, so it's incredible. Even this, there's a lot of truth to it that people don't see yet, but inevitably they say that the U.S. government is like 30, 40 years ahead of your understanding. In this case, it could be over 100 years in terms
That's what I'm
Right.
thinking.
Well,
so.
you want to end it, man?
Well, I appreciate everything. Thank you. Sorry if I knew.
Yeah,
if
thank
I-
you for
if
your
I was
time
an
too,
interview,
for real.
I wouldn't have gotten comfortable. So, but please consider that if you'd like to assist us in just getting it out there. You know, once we get to our 300, then we really start moving. We did start this Fed stalker idea, but we want to give people something they can do right now. You know, so if
Right.
you know, and it's as much as having, we're going to have every member of Congress and Senate, their phone numbers on there too. So if you'd like
Hell
to
yeah.
give them a call, no, I'm dead serious, with a little script, you know, just to leave them a voicemail or tell them what's up. I mean, that's what we're hopeful to do, like a groundswell, hit them from all kinds of different angles because it's and expose some new stuff that a lot of people aren't aware of. So I thank you all, and let's get together again soon.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I
Thank
agree.
you,
Thank
Ryan.
you.
Appreciate you.
Be well.
All right. You too, man.
All right.
Good evening.
Okay.
All right, everybody. That was Ryan with Cognitive Investigative Services on our program here. Obviously,
CIS.
TIs out there, everybody. Thanks for watching, and like, share, and subscribe to our channel. This is Targeted Nation. We love y'all, and we're gonna get it going.
Hey, real quick, just to let everybody know.
CIS, Cognitive Investigative Service. Make sure you put that in because you won't come up with it.
I will.
Real quick, everybody. My case at the airport got dismissed. So fuck y'all.
Peace out. This is Targeted Nation.
Bitch.